Just joining us. Hi, Serena. Nice to see you. I think you're still joining the audio. Hi, Serena. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming. You're one of our newest participants in the 5-week class. I'm really pleased about that and wanted to say thank you. All right, let's get started. Oop. I heard that, Andrew. Welcome to BizHack Live, where every Wednesday at 12:30 we talk to some of the top thought leaders in digital marketing. My name is Dan Gretsch. I'm the CEO and founder of BizHack, a training program dedicated for helping small businesses. And I'm so excited today to welcome Alberto Pardo, better known as Banano, who's going to be talking today about mobile marketing in Latin America and to US Hispanics. We're going to talk about mobile marketing during this very busy election cycle. We're only a few weeks away, and how marketers are targeting US Hispanics in the US in English and in Spanish, and also how different countries use and utilize mobile in their own home countries and different apps and have different usage patterns. As we often talk about, the word Hispanic in the United States is a government term that really groups together people from many, many different countries, cultures, and with many different habits. And so we're going to really break that down today with Alberto, really understand how that works and how that can become relevant to you as a marketer if you're looking to either market to US Hispanics or if you're looking to market overseas in the Southern Hemisphere. I'll also add that this is an area of particular interest and expertise of mine because I spent more than 10 years as a foreign correspondent in Latin America, first for the Miami Herald, where I was the correspondent in Argentina of the Southern Cone. Southern Cone includes Chile, Argentina, Bolivia, Uruguay, Paraguay, but also then as the Latin American correspondent for NPR's Marketplace, where I covered the 34 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as US Hispanics. And I remember as a reporter, I would always get these questions about how are Hispanics different? And I struggled to answer this question. The one thing I would always say is they love the smell of Fabuloso and the smell of lavender, which was very particular. You know, people love the smell of Fabuloso in Latin America, and it seemed like a universal trait. But I think that we're going to learn a lot more today from Alberto from this question that I always was interested in and wanted to have answers to around usage habits and behaviors. After my career as a journalist, you know, at some of the top organizations, I then became a marketer, working for a billion-dollar energy company, 2 software startups, and now marketing my own company, BizHack, which is a small business training program. You can see that at the beginning of this year, we primarily were doing in-person classes. I don't know if you can read it, but it now says live via Zoom. So we've pivoted like so many other businesses during this pandemic. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about this. The hidden toll of COVID-19 is small business death. Right now, we've had more than 200,000 people die and more than 100,000 small businesses die. And that number is going to accelerate. And I bet you we will see a moment with the way things are going when the number of small business death and the number of people death start to match up, because there is an acceleration of small business death due to a lack of federal support by both parties of our small business community. Another phenomenon that's happening is women are dropping out of the workforce at a shocking rate. Before the pandemic, the number of women in the workforce roughly equaled men for the first time ever. And now we're going back a decade or more as women who've traditionally been in the caretaker role are dropping out of the workforce so that they can take care of children who are being homeschooled or being educated via Zoom. This is a almost universal phenomenon across the United States, and it is a huge step back for women entrepreneurs and women business owners everywhere, as those old gender stereotype roles of unequal participation in raising your families is having a big impact on our small businesses. I want to talk about another idea, which is a core value of BizHacks, which is called radical empathy. Radical empathy is the practice of actively striving to understand the feelings and experiences of others, and through doing this, to improve their lives in a concrete fashion. This is from Isabel Wilkerson's very important book, Caste. And I really believe that our act of radical empathy in the face of small business death and women dropping out of the workforce is our concrete action, is our scholarship program for women and entrepreneurs of color. We've had more than 300 applicants to date. 35 plus business owners have been recipients of those scholarships, with scholarships totaling more than $70,000. We have scholarship recipients who are actually on this call today. I'm very proud of this program. And if you or anyone you know is interested in the scholarship program, you can put try.bizhack.com/scholarship and apply today. This is a scholarship that goes towards our 5-week program, which starts November 2nd. And this Friday at 12 noon, I'm going to be having an information session about the scholarship. I encourage you or anyone you know to join. Lilia will also put into the chat how you can RSVP for that, and I hope to see you there on Friday. So I just wanted to acknowledge our partners, Safima and the Miami Marketers. Actually, I'd love, Andrew, if you could take a second and unmute yourself. You're the incoming president of Safima. We're both board members. Could you just tell folks a little bit about what the South Florida IMA is and what some of the work that we do is?
Sure. So in 2019, obviously, we've had to take a step back into a virtual based organization, but Sfima is really kind of a connector of brands, agencies, and media companies and small businesses in South Florida, from Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach. And this, we call it Sfima. And basically every month there's a virtual educational event that we put on in partnership most of the time with BizHack Academy. And this is just an educational kind of nonprofit where, members can gain access to brands, agencies, and case studies across different types of disciplines within the digital world and space. As me coming in as VP to president next year, we're going to be really having a strong focus on Fortune 500 and the bigger regional companies that are based here that were members in the distant past, but it has kind of been pivoted back to small business, but we're trying to get that kind of vision and leadership under myself next year with larger brands, regional agencies, and top-notch education with CMO breakfast and that type of thing. So I look forward to kind of, bringing the vision to light next year. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out. It's Andrew at adsmovil.com, ADSMOVIL.com. Thank you.
Perfect.
Thanks,
and Andrew, feel free to put either information about Safima as well as your contact information. Now, I know that we were at one point offering for COVID impacted entrepreneurs an offer. Is that offer still in place?
Oops.
Uh-oh.
Sorry about that. Yes. So I believe it's $49, or I'm sorry, $15 for new members until the end of the year. Pricing is most likely will stay the same since we're virtual and we're not meeting in person. So I believe it stays at 15, but I'm not quite sure exactly, but I can have that information back over to you, Dan.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm very proud to be a board member of Safima. It's an organization with a long history. In fact, the founder of Safima, Cheryl Cattell, was one of our amazing presenters recently. And the other folks who we wanted to thank is our partners, Miami Marketers. Miami Marketers is a group, it's a networking group of folks in Miami. It's free to join. You can just find them on Facebook and you can join them there. So before we move on to Alberto, I did want to just, guys, give you a little bit of a preview of the amazing stuff that we have coming up over the next couple weeks in BizHack Live. We have our digital marketers graduation party. This is the 5-week cohort. They're going to be doing case studies about digital marketing during the era of COVID, not to be missed this time next week. The week after that, I'm going to give my signature presentation, The 5 Pillars of Digital Campaigns. It's a fabulous presentation, if I may say so myself. one that I usually charge $50 for, but you know, given what so many small businesses are going through, I'm offering it free to the BizHack community. We're doing this in partnership with the Idea Center at Miami-Dade College. The following week, we're going to have a roundtable with ICABA on marketing during the holidays. The creative there is TBD, but we're going to include a number of BizHack alumni who are part of the ICABA Black Entrepreneurs Network. The week after that, we're going to have the amazing Yvette Grove talking about Can Anybody Hear Me? Getting Heard in an Overcrowded World. This is a presentation that she's given to many folks. She's based out of Texas. I think you're going to really enjoy it. We're going to then talk about the 7 keys to exponential marketing, free tools to find your customer online with Emerge Americas. And if you want to sign up for them all, get automatic reminders, calendar invites, and follow-up emails with bonus. Please sign up for our season pass. Lilia will put that link into the chat. It's only $25, and you should think of it as a contribution towards BizHack so that we keep this BizHack Live webinar series going into 2021. We've had a lot of folks sign up for this as a sign of support, and in exchange, you're going to get calendar invites and reminders for all of our upcoming 2020 season of BizHack Live. With that, I wanted to introduce Alberto Banano Pardo. And Alberto, instead of a formal introduction, I gotta ask you, where did Banano come from?
Thank you, Dan, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here, to be a part of your program, amazing program. My nickname comes from when I was a very little kid at school here in Colombia. By the way, I'm here in Bogota, Colombia. And here in Colombia, almost everyone has a nickname. So when I was a little boy at the school, at my primary school, my friends called me Platanito because I used to buy a lot of plantains at school, eat a lot of plantains. So they called me Platanito. It mutated to Bananito and then to Banano. And that's the original story of that.
Does Banano actually mean anything besides
no,
your name?
It's the fruit. Just the fruit doesn't mean anything else. It's like the fruit, and I took it like my name. And actually, if you see my email, it's Banano whatever.
Yeah. I love it.
And actually, yeah, and I just trademark it and use it like my commercial name, and it works because everybody remembers easier the Banano nickname rather than my name. So for me, it's good.
I'm so glad that you're here today, and I want to thank Andrew for introducing us. Andrew from Safima works with Banano. Banano is a gifted visionary and entrepreneur. He's the founder and CEO of Adsmobile, but he has been active in the Latin American market. You were a founder of the Cámara Colombiana de Comercio Electrónico. You were a regional manager for Derramate. You've had an extraordinary background, including an MBA at University of St. Thomas. I'm very excited to talk to you both about Latin America marketing, US Hispanic marketing, mobile marketing, and entrepreneurship. Without further ado, Alberto Pardo of Adsmobile.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna share my screen. I did a presentation for all of you, and thanks for the invitation. I have a very interesting and very updated presentation about what's going on here in Latin America and the US Hispanic market. I would like to focus more on the opportunities that I see in these markets for all of you. I am assuming you all guys have any kind of business, and I was telling Dan before we started this presentation today that I really see a huge opportunity now more than ever to start doing business in Latin America, and I'm gonna show you why. And the reason for that is that we already have all the big companies from the US operating in Latin America from a long time ago. So the opportunity is right now for the small SMB business, small businesses, small entrepreneurs, and Latin America is more open than ever to do business, especially with the US. And I think for the US, Latin America represents the best opportunity in order to increase the trade. And of course, for many millions of small businesses that are located in the US, Latin America must be a target. So I'm gonna start. And after that, when we finish, we can start doing the questions, but I think you guys also can use the chat and write every single question that you might raise. First of all, forgive me for my English. Of course, I'm Colombian, I'm not American, but I will try to do my best. Anyways, if I make a mistake, please forgive me in advance. So the idea of the presentation is to show you a little bit about what's going on. I will start to, to put you in context what's going on today in India. India and China maybe are the largest, or more interesting, or more right now where we see or where everybody talks about the opportunities, and makes sense because India and China, they have a lot of population, right? But if you see what's going on today, not only the attention what it's on India, is because at the end of the day, LATAM, or what we call LATAM is Latin America, is still ahead. And GDP, if you see the GDP in Latin America is almost twice as India, which is one of the most important things that you guys need to consider when you enter into a market. And these kind of things are not usually what everybody see, but Latin America has a very big, in compared to India and compared to China in terms of GDP. If you see, of course, is nearly half of what's going on in China, but it's almost perhaps the same in per capita, right? However, if you see what the reality in Latin America, Brazil is almost the third of our GDP. And this is something that you are going to see in my presentation very, very consistently and repeatedly, that Brazil is basically whatever we call, Brazil is our China. Let's see, in another words, Brazil is perhaps perhaps no, it is the largest economy we have in Latin America. And it's something that for everybody is like Brazil, oh yeah, soccer, party, beaches, nice place. It's beautiful, but Brazil is really a very interesting economic opportunity for everyone, even for us in Latin America. And sometimes in the US, you guys trying to consider Brazil as a not included in Latin America because of the language. Remember that Brazil is the only country in Latin America, the only country of the 34 countries that we have that are not in the Hispanic, or they don't speak Spanish, they speak Portuguese. So it's very important that also Latin America perhaps is one of the youngest populations in the world, which is very important in terms, and very Latin America, it's very young, which represents a huge opportunity in compared to Europe, compared to what's going on in the US, and of course in APAC, where the population is far older than we have. So look, things like by 2020, this year, Latin will have more credit cards owners than India, which is very important. And look, compared is almost 10% more maybe in Latin America car owners, and that's credit card owners. And this is a very important milestone or KPI in order to do business, because at the end of the day, it can show you how developed is the financial systems in each of the countries, especially when you do digital business. It's very important to understand how developed are the financial institutions. It will give you a very good opportunity in terms of how fast you can move in terms of e-commerce or maybe other type of businesses that you will need people totally tagged to the financial systems. Or e-commerce, if you see right now, Latin America has more e-commerce or more buyers today than India. Maybe in 10 years it's going to be different, but today we are talking about today, and today Latin America leads over India and leads over China in many of the key facts of key points that we might consider in order to a point where to build a business, right? Mobile payment subscribers, of course, are much higher in Latin America than in India, and much higher than in other countries. If you see Latin America has been closing the gap comparing to advanced economies. If you see internet users, Latin America has been growing very, 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 very fast. Of course, and if you see, we always put Brazil in front because Brazil is the leading country. But we Latin America have maybe 420 million internet users. If you see, it's almost twice or maybe 1.6 times what you guys have in the US. It's almost 1.2x times what the Europe economies has. So Latin America is going to become in the maybe in the next 10 years one of the largest internet economies or populations in the world. Just to give you an idea, Latin America.
No, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
One quick thing. If you could just project a little more your voice, I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing you. Sorry.
Okay. And how about now? Better?
Yeah, much better. It's more about your voice than about the microphone. Just project.
Okay, perfect. Okay, perfect.
That sounds great. Sorry.
So if you see something very important here is that Latin America, it's including the Caribbean islands, is like 720 million people in population, total population, which is a lot, by the way. But if you see internet users, we right now maybe have maybe 420, and with the COVID, perhaps we will reach 450 by the end of the year. And mostly all these increasing users are coming from mobile users. Actually, if you see the mobile users in Latin America are very big. And this is basically what has been going on in Latin America and in some other poor countries, that the internet economy is purely based on mobile connections. So the broadband is coming not from the fixed lines, but it's coming for the cell phones, So it's very important for Latin America. So we are expecting maybe to grow and to have in the next 4 or 5 years almost 500 million internet users, which is a very big economy if you compare to the US, because the US is more difficult for the US to grow 10 million new internet users than for Latin America to grow 10 more million internet users. Same for Europe. So Latin America is going to become a very important part of the equation in terms of the digital opportunities that we will have here. And this is, by the way, the whole story of the presentations. And if you see, we already have maybe almost 400 smartphone users, 400 million smartphone users in Latin America, which is larger than the US population, for instance. So we represent a very good opportunity for the digital advertisement business, for the e-commerce, for the banking industry, for the streamers, for every single company that we like to penetrate a smartphone business or a business through the apps. Latin America represents a very huge opportunity. Just to give you an example, Facebook has a very big footprint in Latin America, and they also have almost 350 million users, more than the total population, again, from the US. And we also have right now a very interesting milestone, which also have almost 400 million bank accounts users in Latin America. So if you see internet and mobile internet penetration is been growing rapidly, especially because of the huge impact that the mobile or the smartphones are doing in the market. So everyone is getting connected through the smartphones. By the way, Latin America is perhaps the most has the highest penetration of cell phones and cell phones per capita in the world. If you see, Latin America has more cell phones lines than population. Only cell phones. I'm not talking about smartphones. I'm talking about cell phones, which is relatively natural here. If you see the penetration of the cell phones is maybe 110% above population, and the reason for that is that many people has maybe 1, 2, or either 3 cell phones, or companies, or everything. So in general, everyone has more than one cell phone. So very important is that Latin America, as I was telling you, in terms of the saturation of the online population, has or still has a lot of room to grow. And it's not the same case in North America, it's not the same case in Europe, it's not the same case in many other parts of the world where we see a very saturated market. So Latin America represents a very interesting opportunity here in the region. By the way, Brazil is, if you see, is one of the largest countries in the world. Is the fourth country in terms of internet users in the world, and is going to grow dramatically in the next 3 or 4 years. So it's going to become, maybe it's going to surpass Brazil at some point, and it's going to get very, 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 very hot in terms of the internet economy of what's going on. Another very important thing that you guys need to consider is that Latin America is also a very young audience in terms of the people that is surfing the web or doing digital things. So Latin America perhaps is one of the youngest populations in the internet. If you see people from 0 to 24 is very big. Brazil, by the way, leads that part in Latin America, but we have a lot of young people over the internet, which makes very promise to build a business thinking in 5-10 years, because those people are going to get older and older and older, and at some point they're going to have a bank account, and at some point they're going to buy a car, at some point they're going to buy a house, and at some point they're going to have money to spend in many things, and that's the whole thing about the economy, which is very, very, very important. There's another important thing, and if you see Latin America users are highly active on the internet, especially on social media. But if you see in Brazil and in general Latin America, we spend a lot of time in the internet, which makes a very attractive country for that. If you see, of course, mobile connections is still growing and growing and growing, and internet population is becoming more and more bigger. We already surpass, of course, as I mentioned before, what's going on in North America. And if you see the expectations of what's going on is maybe to reach 70% of total penetration in the next maybe 2 or 3 years of broadband connection or internet connection in most of the countries. However, Latin America is one of the most unequal regions in the world, and that's true, and that's something that we have been working. Several the governments have been working to try to reverse this. But if you see, only Africa maybe leads which leads this horrible KPI is the one that is leading. So, by the way, most of the countries have been improving this inequality in the past year, but what's going on today with the COVID, I think we are going to go back maybe 10 years. That's horrible, but this is the truth. So what's going on here in Latin America is that perhaps Latin America will have the highest impact on the economy in the world because of the coronavirus. That's what all the analysts say about Latin America, that we are going to maybe receive the hardest shock of the COVID in terms of the economic slowdown. But on the other hand, they also say, the analysts say, that Latin America is going to recover faster than all the other ones. So if you see what's going on.
For a second, could you just dig in a little bit more? What is it specifically about Latin America that's going to make COVID worse there? And then with your permission, sure. I have a couple of questions that are being asked. I'd like to pause for a sec and ask those questions and then let you continue if that's okay.
Absolutely. Let me get from the beginning.
So I'll ask the questions. Don't worry about that. But
okay.
I'll moderate that. But if you could, what is it about Latin America that's going to make COVID worse than like India, which is similarly sized economy, similarly unruly population? It's not like a command and control. Two sets of democracies. Why is Latin America going to be worse?
I mean, it's the economic impact where it's going to be worst in Latin America. maybe than India. And this is what is happening really today. I think COVID is going to be worst in terms of number of people infected, maybe in India at some point. If we don't discover or we don't get the cure or a vaccine in the next 6 or 8 months, by the way, India is going to surpass even the US in number. Maybe it's going to become the number one country in terms of COVID cases. But the worst part of this is going to happen in Latin America in terms of economic crash. And the reason for that is because of the political decisions that have been made in Latin America. I don't know, maybe you guys don't know, but we have total shutdowns or lockdowns from 4 countries: Argentina, Peru, Colombia, and I'm missing and Chile. We have lockdowns for almost 90 or 100 days. Can you imagine the effect of that in the economy? This is not happening in India. This is not happening in the other parts of the world. So if you lock down the whole down economy, you see the biggest impact, of course, that is coming from those type of politics of lockdowns, full lockdowns. I think India, and I believe India is not taking that decision, and that's why I believe India is not going to suffer the same impact in the economy as Latin America.
Another quick question, which is, everybody's heart goes out to Venezuela, and the tragedy that predated COVID. Could you just say a word about what's happening in Venezuela related to COVID? An economy that was already used to be one of the richest in the world, still have the largest oil reserves in the world, and where hunger and severe poverty has become commonplace.
Yeah, first of all, Colombia perhaps used to be the partner, the commercial partner, the largest commercial partner Venezuela had at some point, and for Colombia, Venezuela was exactly the same. So Colombia and Venezuela, at the end of the day, we are like brothers. And first of all, I'm very sad about what's going on there. And I just want to make some comments that I think the current government is really not telling the truth about the situation in Venezuela. It's horrible what's happening there. And the reason for that is that since they control all the communication channels, it's almost impossible to understand what really is going on there. What we have today, what we see, it's a fraction of the reality. But I am sure that what is happening in Venezuela is a very nightmare. I mean, they are facing a horrible situation. There's no gasoline, for instance. So people, so if you grow food, if you are a potato grower, you don't have gasoline to transport the potato to the supermarkets or to the markets in general. So things like that are right now happening today, which is almost unbelievable, since Venezuela used to have or has the largest oil reserves in the world and used to be one of the richest country, as you mentioned before, in the world before the 80s. So it's horrible what is happening there, and I'm sure that the COVID is doing a very big impact as in the other countries in Latin America, but we don't know exactly what's going on there. So we hopefully these guys are going to recover and take the lead of the democracy as they have to.
Perfect. Beatriz Ayala from Musicasa asked, do you have projections for the next 5 to 10 years?
Yes, I might have. I'm not sure if I put it in this presentation, Beatriz, but I can send you. I will send to Dan a very good presentation about 5 to 10 years projection about most of the internet economy in Latin America. A very nice document that it was released maybe last week. And I think it has a projection that I can, of course, share with you, Beatriz.
And what we're going to do is we're going to share with you the folks who participated today so that you can actually send it to Beatriz directly if you wanted.
Okay, perfect.
And that way that Beatriz can be in direct touch with you. Kevin Mather asked, do you have data on cross-border B2C e-commerce?
Not on this presentation, but I might have some. It's relatively small, cross-border. maybe in Mexico, it is not as small as in the other countries. And the reason for that is because Mexico is very close from the US. So people, for instance, in general, the Mexicans are very likely to buy through Amazon from the US and things like that. So, but it's been growing, and I'm sure that COVID accelerated that many 10 or 20 times. I will try to find some information and make sure that you have it. I know there's a company in Argentina that has been doing some studies about cross-border, so I might have some information on that.
Perfect. And then Wilson Guaraca asked, would love to hear about the access to capital in the region, venture capital, for instance, and any thoughts on how COVID is going to alter this. Fabulous.
I have a presentation. I have some slides at the end of this presentation about the opportunity and what's going on, which, by the way, COVID really has not really affected the capital investment in Latin America, especially on the digital. Actually, this year and last year have been we have received the largest amount of money coming from VCs, especially from the US, supporting all these digital economy companies growing very fast in Latin America.
Perfect. All right. So I want to make an agreement with you. I have so many questions myself. If we could maybe give another 10 or so minutes to your formal presentation, and then
absolutely
jump into the Q&A, which frankly is my favorite part.
Absolutely. And I think it's amazing to have this to share. So look, technology, I think the technology and penetration, and this is where we see the biggest opportunity here, is because Latin America has a very small investment in technology. And this is the opportunity that we see, because this has to change. Look India, look China, look the US, and whatever is going to happen the same at some point in Latin America. It doesn't care if you are a big or a medium or a small business, but here is the opportunity. Any type of technology that you could think could be applied to Latin America, and of course, could be a very important business. One important and very important thing that you guys need to consider when you do business in Latin America is the importance of WhatsApp. And largest market for WhatsApp in the world is Brazil. 99% of penetration has a WhatsApp in Brazilian market, which is crazy. By the way, remember that WhatsApp launched a peer-to-peer wired money transfer system, and they launched it like 3 months ago, and they test Brazil as the first market. So imagine the importance for Facebook, the business in Brazil in terms of WhatsApp. And remember that WhatsApp is going to help, especially the small businesses, on how to connect people with businesses. Very, very, very easy. Right now, we see it here in Latin America, for instance, in Colombia. If you want to order a pizza, you just go into a WhatsApp pizza business, and you just order. They send you a small link. You just click the link and put your credit card data and make the transaction. It's pure online transaction, and it's basically through WhatsApp. And WhatsApp for business is very, very, very popular here in Latin America, by the way. So consider that if you guys think to do business, maybe it's a very easy and very cost-efficient way to create an e-commerce here. Maybe you just need, or if you got a sales force, for instance, many companies that have large sales force in Latin America, with the lockdowns, everyone is at home, but maybe right now, all these sales force are doing sales using WhatsApp at home, attending all of the e-commerce people that are maybe asking or trying to make transactions with some kind of support from an agent or from a sales prospective guy. So this is very important, the WhatsApp business. Look, I think Beatriz asked about the next 5 to 10 years. I can show you the past 5 to 10 years, what's happening in Brazil. And if you see, of course, Brazil e-commerce has been growing so fast. If you consider, look, Brazil is maybe the 7th or the 6th largest economy in e-commerce in the world. Is half of what's happening in e-commerce in Latin America. And if you see, of course, Brazil is almost half of what's happening here in almost everything. In e-commerce is 50%, in credit card users is 57%, in internet users is 65%, mobile users 65%. So Brazil is very big for us. Of course, B2C, which is the e-commerce, the business to consumer, is been growing so fast in the other countries, especially in Mexico. In Mexico, it started to grow dramatically since Amazon arrived 3 years ago. So the retail started to accelerate investment on e-commerce, and of course, the e-commerce grew fantastic, dramatically. And look what's happening in the e-commerce in the past years in Latin America. It represents a very good opportunity. What happened in the, in 10 weeks, which is the March until maybe the end of April, happened in the past 10 years. At some point in Brazil, it was a penetration, a huge penetration, not the same one that it happens in the US. I think the US grew faster, according to what the McKinsey showed in one of the reports, but Brazil did really a big jump, especially in Latin America as well, did a big jump in the e-commerce in the coronavirus, by the way. It helped a lot. And on the other hand, we see also a very huge opportunity in the advertisement space. So digital advertisement will be very big. And the reason for that is that there's still a lot of room to grow if you see the penetration or the share of attention compared to the share of budget. The share of attention is the black column, and when you see digital, you see a black column and then a blue. The blue is the real investment, and the black is the share of attention. And as you see, the share of attention is still far behind from the budget. So it's expected that the share of budget or the investment grows rapidly in order to be the same or very equal between the attention and the budget that is what's happening in the US today. So digital advertisement is also a very promising business in Latin America, especially in mobile, since I already told you that almost all the internet right now in Latin America is moved through cell phones. Also, of course, compared to other economies, Latin America is not as big as other economies. Maybe the total advertisement spending in Latin America this year will reach maybe $12 billion, which is relatively small compared to what's happening in the US and in other economies, but it's still a very good opportunity for that. There's also another opportunity here in Latin America that I see is the people that really produce content, maybe small producers that would like to penetrate Spanish speaking. In Latin America is one of the key markets. If you see, for instance, the case of Netflix, I don't know if you are aware of this, but Netflix decided to come to penetrate Latin America first before they went to other countries. And the reason for that is that they discovered that Latins are crazy about consuming this type of solutions, like the OTTs or the Netflix or the Prime Videos or etc. And the same for TikTok. TikTok has been growing dramatically in all Latin America. So this is a very important point or topic, that content is very important, especially in video, is very popular here in Latin America. So the future in Latin America, as I mentioned before, is totally digital. Tech penetration is a very important, tech adoption, a lifeline during the pandemic. Of course, the pandemic accelerated this very fast. And of course, everybody's thinking on how to build the path for digital. And regarding the VC opportunity, if you see Latin America, look what happened in 2019. It's almost a record in the money that the VC investments in Latin America, and especially in Brazil, where maybe 60% of that money went to that. Look, right now, for instance, the startup booming. This is a ranking that these guys built. Sao Paulo is the 12th city to start a startup or a digital startup in that. There's also a very important point, and here in Latin America, Apple is almost doesn't exist. Maybe 88-90% of the penetration of the smartphones is coming from Android. So this is very important also to consider, which is kind of unique. compared maybe to India or maybe to Africa, but it's not the case in other economies where iOS has a very large penetration. So that's something that you guys need to consider as well. M-commerce, as I mentioned before, is also becoming very relevant. And the reason for that is that the huge penetration of smartphones and the people that are very younger people, are more likely to use cell phones. And Latin America, it's mostly young people. And of course, relatively poor people. Maybe the smartphones are the only source of connecting to the internet, by the way. So this is, of course, something that is going to grow or explode the m-commerce in the next coming of years. Also, the mobile payments, which is happening right now, the fintechs that are moving Latin America, I think are reshaping what we know about the financial or the banking industry. And it's happening right now in a very big effort in most of the countries, and in part because of the coronavirus, and is helping a lot to penetrate all these fintechs. 2022 looks great, but the opportunity is today, as I mentioned before. If you compare Latin with China and India, just like to make a small recap, Latin America is among the most promising markets, and the opportunity is right now for you. If you see or if you consider Latin by 2050, you will see, of course, that Latin America will remain on top. It was going to be very big, by the way. But on the other hand, we always think that doing business in Latam is hard, is difficult, but India and China are more difficult, are harder to do. And the reason for that is that in Latin America, if you see there are 32 countries, which is 32 realities, almost 32 languages. We call it everything in Spanish, but at the end of the day, it's not the same language. 32 different laws, 32 different regulations, 32 different countries. So you need to treat it as a different country, each one. So sometimes that's why many companies think that get or enter into Latam represents a trouble. The ones that really understand that Latin America is not equal. For instance, I was telling some clients at New York with Andrew, which is here in this presentation, that in Latin America, Venezuela used to be very big consuming one brand of toothpaste, while Colombia, which is in the border, has the opposite toothpaste brand as a leader. So things totally in the opposite, and with countries like very that in general looks very similar, but have totally different behaviors in terms of consumption. So that's very important. For instance, people in Latin America, we like to drink liquors, but not every country likes hard liquor, for instance. And we drink different liquors in some points at different hours. If you see the Mexicans are more in the hard liquor, but if you see in Central America and the Caribbean, they love more or the rum or the beer. And if you see in the south of Latin America, with the southern corner, they prefer the wine. And if you go to Brazil, maybe it's totally mixed between beer and wine and hard liquor. So it's not the same. So if you are a brand, you cannot consider Latin America as one country. You need to understand that it's a different cultures and different everything in order to set up a business. Also, Latin America is not an easy in terms of the way to do business. If you see, Brazil is 120 country most difficult to do business. India is 142, Argentina is 124, Mexico is 39, which is pretty good. Chile is 41, and Colombia, I think, is 57. If I don't. And just to mention, and it's almost the presentation is going to finish in a couple of slides. We also have some unicorns, very big, that operate here in Latin America with very big market caps. And there's another very important tip for all of you, for the ones that are looking Brazil as a potential, and think always that Brazil as a very play locally. And that's one of the recommendations that everybody does, is if you go to Brazil, try to speak in Portuguese, try to invoice locally, try to maybe to partner someone locally, try to go the local as you can in order to guarantee that the business is going to flow. Of course, correctly. And on the other hand, of course, the other hand of the Latinos here in Latin America is the US Hispanic market, which is, by the way, another big and huge market. And I'm gonna provide you a very quick show, an overview, 2 or 3 slides about what's going on with the US Hispanics in the US, which I think is one of the most biggest opportunities that everyone has in the US. If you see the US Latino market, the GDP is growing at 8.6%, faster than China and India. The economy is, or was, 2.6 trillion in 2018 and up almost 9% compared to 2017. There are 2.5 Latinos for every Asian American in college. If the US Latino market was its own country, it would be the 8th largest economy in the world, which is a very important methodology. Or on the other hand, it would be the largest Latino market in the world. It would be larger than Brazil and twice the size of Mexico in terms of GDP, which is very important. The economy and the impact of the economy, the US economy, because of the Latino is very important. This is a very quick snapshot about what's going on. There's another important thing about the Hispanics in the US, and they are over-indexed in the way they use the cell phones. So if you want to reach Latinos, maybe the cell phones, the smartphones is one of the more smart and easiest way to reach them massively because of everyone has a smartphone, and the use of the smartphones is very big. If you see here in this graph, you see that Hispanics, of course, use internet much, and the penetration and the usage is higher than the non-Hispanics. So this is also a very important methodology. And if you see what's going on with the population, which I think is very important, is that population is still growing. And by the way, it's going to be very big. By maybe 2035, it's going to reach almost 100 million people. Right now, it's almost 20% of the total population in the US, which I think it's a very important number for the Hispanics. And by California, Texas, Florida, New York, and Arizona, and the largest DMAs for them, which makes them the most important ones. And another important topic to talk is about, how young is the Latins or the US Hispanics, which is Latinos are the youngest population. So it's very important. Millennials are very big in terms of for the US Hispanics versus non-Hispanics. And this is all what I have for today. I'm going to stop sharing my presentation to become maybe to the questions that you guys want to talk.
Perfect. So one of the questions is from Beatriz. She asked about money transfer platforms like PayPal or Venmo, and do they vary by country?
Yes, and in the past, Beatriz, and very nice question, because I think I was looking at the number of money, or the amount of money that is transferred almost every year. I think it's almost $50 billion in transfers between the US through Latin America. It's huge. The business is huge, and mostly is Mexico. I think is the largest country. Then is Colombia. Ecuador is also very big. Peru and Central American countries, which makes sense with the population in the US. But it's a huge business. And in terms of platforms that you see, of course, Western Union used to be the leader, and I think it still has a very big portion of the business today. But this business has to be transformed by PayPal and everything. The thing with PayPal here in Latin America is that PayPal has not been able to get license for transferring money in most of the countries. So I think it's a matter of regulation, what is not letting those new players, so new economy players, to penetrate really hard, like Venmo and all these apps that you see in the US. Those are not really popular here in Latin America. Latin America, I think the banks and the smaller, like the Western Unions, and there are all like more like a bank, more like a financial institutions. Those are the ones that are right now transferring the money. But that's a very good question, because I really see a very important opportunity on that point.
So, Carlos, just wanted to let you know, we're not going to have time to talk about the cannabis industry, but I do appreciate your question, and perhaps if there's some information, Alberto, that you have to follow up with him on that.
Absolutely. There's a lot of noise about it, especially here in Colombia, but I have some documentation about it. Of course, I can send it to Carlos.
Perfect. I wanted to talk about Rappi for a sec. Rappi is a kind of the WeChat of Latin America. Increasingly, it's a uniform Latin American payment platform. I actually was meeting yesterday with the head of Latin American payments for Spotify, and he talked about one of the huge challenges of being able to penetrate the Latin American market is the very different ways in which each country conducts commerce. In fact, many folks pay for their Spotify subscriptions at kioscos with cash.
Yeah, right.
And Rappi is a messaging platform that has incorporated almost like debit card-like functionality, and it is increasingly becoming popular across the region, helping solve this unbanked issue, and frankly, putting Latin America in some ways, like China is, ahead of the United States in terms of what I think is the next wave of digital
absolutely
acclimation.
Dan, what is happening is that Rappi, by the way, they claim to be the first super app in Latin America, and I'm going to explain you exactly. Super app is like WeChat, which is an app that you have many of services just only on one app. So you have e-commerce, you have payments, you have chat, you have almost everything, entertainment. So you got your own Netflix, you got your own Zoom, you got your own e-commerce, you got Amazon, your own PayPal. That's what they call the super app, and they think that model, which works very, very, very good in Asia, it will work dramatically well in Latin America. Rappi, when Rappi arrived, and by the way, it's a Colombian company, when they launched as a last mile e-commerce company. And that's exactly what they were doing. They were doing the last mile, which is the delivery, and they basically broke the record of delivery in terms of timing, because if you see, Amazon claims to deliver in the US in 2 hours, in 1 hour, or Rappi delivers to you whatever in 20 minutes. So it's an incredible thing. So you just have the app. Maybe you need a Dolex, or maybe you just want a beer, and maybe you ask for a beer and they just bring it to you in 10 minutes and it's still cold, the beer. You can still have a cold beer. You know what I mean? So those are the things that those guys are changing, people using bikes, not motorcycles, bikes. So that's incredible. So, and they also develop a payment gateway, which is an e-wallet that they are trying, of course, to it's an app for payments. So they want to become also a financial player in the region. But I think Mercado Libre, which is the eBay in Latin America, has another payment system. They call it Mercado Pago, which is a scan code. It's kind of a barcode for payments, touchless and everything. And I believe today is the largest player on the new payments methods in Latin America. But still, it's a very important and very big opportunity, not also for Rappi, but also for the competitors. There's maybe another competitor in Brazil for Rappi named iFood, very big. I think is 10 times larger than Rappi in Brazil, and Rappi is very big. And on the other hand, we see the other last mile player, which is Uber Eats. Remember that Uber Eats in Latin America became a mobility player. They partnership the restaurants and they deliver it to you. They became the last miler using the cars and all, of course, the technology. And they also develop a payment gateway, which is the Uber payments or whatever they call it. And it's pretty popular, especially in Mexico.
We have one more question from the audience that I wanted to ask, and then I'm going to end with a question about the election.
Okay.
Since I know you guys do work there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a great question from Kevin Mather, who unfortunately left the chat, but it's still a good question. Where do you think are the opportunities in the Latin American region for US-based small and medium-sized businesses? So if you're a small business in the US and you're interested in doing business in Latin America, where do you think are the best opportunities? Whether it's
I will start in Central America or in Colombia, because I mean, Colombia is a nice size and it's pretty competitive and pretty open, but Central America is developed. So maybe you can test, or maybe you just, because in Latin America, you need to make some you need to adapt the product that you have in the US and to play in Latin America. So maybe you just can start doing a soft launch maybe in Central America. Central America, by the way, is very, very connected to the US. So I think it's very, very, very likely to do it when you have something maybe more mature. Mexico is the country that you should go. Mexico, Colombia, and Central America. I would say, and it used to be Venezuela, because Venezuela used to be very big. If you want to play hard, go to Brazil. But you have to think differently, and of course, maybe try to play more locally than a foreign company. But I would say the answer for Kevin is Central America, maybe Guatemala, or maybe Costa Rica, which Guatemala is the largest in population and 14 million, I think, and Costa Rica is far smaller, maybe 4 or 5 million. But you can test the product there. You just can do, the fine tuning of your product, and then just move to Mexico, which is largest, or Colombia. Peru is also a nice country to do business.
So my question is, I know from having spoken to Andrew that your business has grown this year despite the massive economic fallout. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One of them is the presidential election, and a number of political players on both sides of the aisle have leveraged Adsmobile to help grow their reach of US Hispanics. The other is the Black Lives Matter movement. And interestingly, that has raised awareness of the importance of targeting specific underrepresented demographics, including brown folk, including Hispanics, if you will. And so I'd love you to just address those 2 points. What are you seeing from your vantage point at Adsmobile, both in terms of election targeting of US Hispanics and also of brands and corporations targeting of US Hispanics and Latin Americans?
So the first thing that I want to let you know is that the Hispanics that lives in the US are totally different than the Hispanics that lives in Latin America. That's also very important for everyone to know. The Mexican living in the US is not the same Mexican living in Mexico. So that's the most important thing to understand, okay? And regarding your question, I'm going to start with the second one, which is about the brands, in general, the brands trying to target Latinos. And I think because of the big population of Latinos and the different way that the Latinos behave, especially, the mother or the women is the owner of the home, and they decided most of the things that they buy, which happens exactly the same in Latin America as the Hispanics in the US. Of course, the companies need to understand the best way to communicate with those segments, let's say. And language is something that is very important for Latinos. Maybe if you see, maybe Latinos are described as first generation, the ones that just recently arrived to the US. The second generation Latinos are the ones that maybe arrived at some point with their parents, and their parents are not from the US, but maybe they just got, for whatever the reason, or they born in the US, or maybe they just became, they got the green card or whatever in the process. They call it second generation. And third generation is where your grandfather used to be Latino. I think the opportunities in Latinos first generation where the Spanish language is very strong on the ADN, everyone. So maybe, for instance, first generation, they don't speak English or a little English, so everything is almost in Spanish. Second generation Latinos, especially the younger population, millennials, they do all the social activity in English. I mean, they just go to school and speak English as everyone. And when they go home, they speak Spanish. and they listen to Spanish music and they sing in Spanish and they maybe watch soccer. And when they go to soccer, they also go back to their own roots and maybe with the food, some family food and soccer are maybe the most important, and music are the things that are really tied to their roots. So the brands know that, they all know that the Latinos behave that way, so they are trying to get ways to communicate. They also know that the Latinos over-index in smartphones, so they prefer to connect with them in smartphones than maybe other platforms. That's, of course, something very important. And I think what happened in the US because of the Black Lives Matter and everything is that there's a resurrection of the Hispanic opportunity in the US. I think when the current president arrived, all the Latino community, all the efforts from the big companies or the American corporations doing efforts to communicate with Latinos, they backed a little bit because they were afraid that the current president was going to take action on that. Remember that the day the current president, he said, no, I'm going to ask Ford to close shut down all the plants in Mexico, and everyone wants to buy the trucks here in the US and blah, blah, blah. Those kind of things that, of course, everyone started. We don't know if we need to target very openly or to communicate very openly to Hispanics because we don't want any problem with the government. Of course not. But everything is changing. And I think right now everyone needs to understand that there's a big opportunity. And of course that the largest minority is the Latino. So if you want to target minorities, Latinos are, by the way, the 80% of the minorities in the US. So that's the second question. The first one, which is coming to the elections, definitely because of what's happening right now, and it's been happening in the past 3 elections, is that the key states are very important. The population of Latinos it's very big. So at the end of the day, Latinos are very important in the key decision markets for what's going on. Look what's happening right now in Florida, which who will ever imagine that Florida was going to be the key state maybe to define the elections? And the Colombian population, look what's happening in the past 2 weeks. Trump no one in the elections before have talked about Colombia. I mean, no one. That's not the topic. I think you guys need to talk about your topics, but he's going after the Colombian voters, which is fair enough. And of course, the other, Biden is going to do the same, and everyone is going to try to come after the Latinos. And I think this year, the number or the amount of money behind the elections, behind the Latinos is going to set up a record for the Spanish-speaking Latinos, because I think Latinos, I think it's 32 million possible voters. It's a lot of voters, potential voters in the US. And of course, they will make the difference this year and who's going to be the next president of the United States.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for the time, the amazing insights. Very, very much appreciate it. We're going to be sharing these slides with all the amazing data, and Alberto and his team, Bonanno and his team, are also going to be following up individually with several of you who had specific requests of data that he can then provide. With that, I wanted to quickly just talk about what we have coming up again in BizHack Live, and then we'll say goodbye, and thanks for sticking around a little bit extra. So coming up, as I said, in BizHack Live, is, I don't know, oh, there you are. Coming up in BizHack Live is going to be our graduation party next Wednesday, the 5 pillars of digital campaigns, a holiday marketing roundtable in partnership with ICABA. Can anybody hear me? Getting heard in an overcrowded world. The 7 keys to exponential marketing. Free tools to find your ideal customer online with Emerge Americas. Just an amazing lineup. I'm so grateful to you guys for being here today. Feel free to sign up for our season pass if you'd like to learn more. And most importantly, I just want to end with this note. We are in a crisis, a political crisis, a cultural crisis, obviously a health crisis. inside of crisis is danger and opportunity, and we're here to help you grasp that opportunity. Please come back and join us again next week for BizHack Live. And with that, I say thanks a lot. Thanks all to joining us today. Thank you, Bonanno. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Amy, Carl, Anthony, Carlos, great question. David, Gustavo, Johanna, thank you all. Karina, who we're going to have up here doing exponential marketing in a few weeks. Lorena, Lucy, Othar, great to see you there. Renato, Othar, looking forward to having you part of next semester. Stacy C, Yolanda, always great to see you. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining. See you next week.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Stacy.
You're welcome, Dan.